Careful with that. What would you even know about building something that lasts? The voice, slick with the easy condescension of inherited wealth, cuts through the cathedral-like silence of the study. Julian Vance doesn't even look up from his phone as he speaks. The words are aimed not at a person, but at a presence, a uniform, a function. Sarah, the family's maid, freezes. Her hand, holding a microfiber cloth, hovers an inch above the miniature world spread across a vast mahogany table. It's a scale model of the new Vance Philanthropy Wing, a monument of acrylic and laser-cut steel that will soon be attached to the city's main art museum. A building designed to immortalize a name. Sarah's eyes trace the model's sterile, perfect lines. She sees the tiny, faceless figures meant to represent the public, arranged artfully on the miniature plaza. They look like ants. She knows about building. She knows what it takes to mix mortar in the sun until your back screams. She knows the smell of wet earth and the weight of a foundation stone. But the knowledge is hers alone, a language no one in this house would ever think to ask her if she spoke. She says nothing. In her line of work, silence is a shield. A response would be an interruption, a transgression. It would make her visible in a way she cannot afford to be. Instead, her spine straightens by a millimeter, an internal adjustment that goes unseen. Her free hand, hidden by the crisp fabric of her apron, instinctively moves to her pocket. Inside, her fingers find the familiar, worn edges of a photograph. It's creased from years of being carried, its surface softened to the texture of old linen. The image itself is a secret, a private well of strength she draws from in moments like these. "Julian, leave her be," Arthur Vance, the patriarch, murmurs from behind his colossal desk. It's not a defense of Sarah, it's a dismissal of his son's petulance. Arthur is a man carved from granite and ambition, his presence filling the room with a low-humming pressure. He is reviewing quarterly reports, his world a landscape of numbers and projections. The maid, the model, the son, they are all just figures in the periphery of his vision. Julian finally looks up, a smirk playing on his lips. "I'm just admiring Dad's legacy, making sure the help does too." He circles the table, his expensive loafers silent on the thick Persian rug. He leans over the model, his shadow falling across the tiny glass atrium. It's quite something, isn't it? To build something that will outlive you, something people will see and remember. He gestures vaguely in Sarah's direction. Some people just clean things, others create them. Sarah focuses on a smudge of oil from the architect's fingers on the acrylic roof of the miniature building. She carefully, methodically, buffs it away. Her movements are economical, precise. It's a skill she has honed over years of service, the ability to erase any trace of imperfection, including her own presence. To be so good at your job that you disappear. Her fingers are still resting on the photograph in her pocket. She can feel the ghost of a shape under her thumb, the uneven roofline of a small, single-story building. A school. A school built not of steel and glass, but of sun-baked bricks and community will. A place that didn't bear a family name, but instead held the future of a village within its walls. That, she thinks, is something that lasts. The thought is a silent rebellion, a quiet counter-narrative to the grandeur of the room. Julian, bored now, wanders over to the wet bar and pours himself a glass of amber liquid. The clink of ice against crystal is the only sound. Arthur Vance turns a page. The moment of casual cruelty has passed, already forgotten by the two men who authored it. But for Sarah, it lingers in the air like a bitter perfume. She finishes her dusting, her gaze sweeping the room one last time to ensure everything is in its proper place. The leather-bound books arranged by color, not content. The family portraits where smiles were polished and professional. The heavy drawn curtains that kept the real world out. It is a house of surfaces, a museum of success. She gives a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a signal that her task is complete. No one acknowledges it. She turns and walks towards the door, her steps as quiet as the ones Julian's expensive shoes had made. Her hand remains in her pocket, her fingers wrapped around the worn photo as if it were an anchor. It is her proof. Proof of a life lived, a world built, a self that existed long before she ever put on this uniform and would exist long after she took it off. The heavy study door clicks shut behind her, leaving the Vances alone with their legacy of glass and steel. The Vance mansion transforms. Over a frantic 48 hours, The quiet austerity of its halls gives way to the managed chaos of a high-stakes media event. Cables snake across priceless rugs, and lighting rigs cast sterile, alien shadows on the ancestral portraits. The Vances are announcing a staggering $20 million donation to build a network of state-of-the-art schools across West Africa. It is a spectacle of philanthropy, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to saturate the news cycle with their benevolence. Sarah moves through the periphery of the storm, a ghost in her gray and white uniform. She polishes already gleaming surfaces, straightens immaculate floral arrangements, and ensures that the champagne flutes are arranged in perfect, crystalline rows. She is the invisible machinery that makes such an event appear effortless. She overhears snippets of conversation, the PR team discussing camera angles, Julian complaining about the catering, Mrs. Vance fretting over her choice of jewelry. It all feels distant, like a play being rehearsed in a language she understands but does not feel. The event begins. Arthur Vance stands at a podium bearing the family crest, his voice resonating with practiced sincerity. He speaks of opportunity, of global citizenship, of the moral imperative to uplift the less fortunate. Cameras flash, their strobing lights creating a stuttering, unreal motion. Reporters scribble in their notepads, capturing the handsome quotes that will adorn their articles. Sarah is tasked with navigating the throng of guests, a silver tray of canapés held aloft. It requires a dancer's grace, anticipating the sudden pivots of engrossed conversations, the backward steps of gesturing guests. She is in the center of the room, yet completely unseen. It is during one such maneuver, sidestepping a heated debate between two journalists, that her wallet, jostled from her apron pocket, falls to the floor. It lands with a soft, insignificant thud on the white marble. The worn leather flaps open, and the photograph, her photograph, flutters out, landing face up. For a heart-stopping second, the image is exposed to the world, a row of smiling, barefoot children standing proudly before a simple, one-room schoolhouse under a vast, pale sky. Before she can even bend to retrieve it, a heavy, polished leather shoe descends. Julian, laughing at a joke a city councilman just told, plants his foot squarely on the photograph. He grinds it into the floor, his weight pressing the image into the grit and dust of the polished stone. He doesn't notice. To him it is nothing, less than a stray napkin. He moves on, his laughter echoing. Sarah's breath catches in her throat. The world seems to slow down, the noise of the party fading to a dull roar. She sees only the shoe, the careless desecration of her most sacred memory. She waits for the group to pass, then quickly stoops to the floor. Her fingers tremble as she picks up the photograph. A dirty scuff mark mars the center, right across the smiling face of a little girl in a bright yellow dress. A corner is bent, the paper bruised. "What's that?" Julian has turned back, his eyes catching the movement. He looks down at the photo in her hand with a dismissive curiosity. "A postcard from your Maid village," he asks, his voice loud enough for the councilman and a nearby journalist to hear. He smirks, expecting a laugh. The councilman obliges with a tight, uncomfortable chuckle. The journalist's expression is harder to read, a flicker of something, pity. Interest? Before it settles back into professional neutrality. Humiliation, hot and sharp, washes over Sarah. It's one thing to be insulted in private, another to have her past, her home, her very identity mocked and literally trampled upon in a room full of strangers. She wants to say something. She wants to hold up the photo and explain that the little girl in the yellow dress is her niece, that the building behind her is not a Maid village, but a place of hope she helped build with her own two hands. She wants to scream. Instead, she closes her fingers around the photograph, tucking it safely into her palm. She looks at Julian, her expression unreadable. She gives a small, dutiful nod, the gesture of a servant acknowledging a master, and melts back into the crowd. The heat in her chest feels like a furnace, but her face is a mask of calm composure. Would you have kept quiet? Her silence is her armor, but tonight it feels impossibly heavy. The Vance's philanthropic triumph lasts exactly 4 days. On the 5th day, the foundation cracks. It doesn't begin with a whisper, it begins with an earthquake. An online investigative journal, known for its meticulous, data-driven takedowns of the powerful, publishes a bombshell report. The headline is a blade. Vance's African Schools, a trail of empty lots and broken promises. The article is devastatingly thorough. It uses satellite imagery, financial records obtained through international Freedom of Information requests, and on-the-ground interviews with local community leaders. It shows that of the 12 schools the Vance Foundation had claimed to have built and funded over the past 5 years, 9 were nothing more than barren plots of land. 2 were half-finished, skeletal structures, abandoned to the elements. Only 1 was operational, and it was funded and built almost entirely by a different, smaller NGO that the Vance Foundation had briefly partnered with before severing ties and taking full credit. The $20 million pledge announced at the party was, the report revealed, the latest move in a long-running philanthropic laundering scheme. The Vances would announce a massive donation, reap the PR benefits and the massive tax write-offs, then channel the money through a labyrinth of shell corporations and opaque subcontractors. A trickle of funds would make it to the intended region, just enough to generate some paperwork, before the rest was absorbed back into other Vance-controlled enterprises. Panic rips through the mansion with the force of a hurricane. The phones begin to ring, a ceaseless, shrieking chorus of inquiries from news outlets, board members, and business partners. Arthur Vance's roar can be heard from the West Wing, a sound of pure, undiluted fury. He is not a man accustomed to being exposed. He is a man who builds the walls, who controls the narrative. Sarah is in the middle of her morning duties when the story breaks. She sees it on a tablet a junior staffer left on a countertop. She reads the headline and a strange, cold stillness settles over her. It is not triumph she feels, not even vindication. It is a grim, heavy sense of inevitability, like watching a storm you knew was coming finally make landfall. She knew. She didn't know the specifics, the cold, hard numbers, but she had seen the disconnect between the glossy brochures and the quiet, desperate emails she sometimes glimpsed from regional coordinators. The atmosphere in the house becomes toxic. Staff members whisper in huddled groups, their faces a mixture of fear and morbid excitement. Julian is a ghost, pale and shaken, his usual arrogance replaced by a raw, unfocused anger. Mrs. Vance has retired to her chambers with a migraine, the classic retreat of the family's elite women in times of crisis. The real storm, however, is in the study. Sarah is called in to serve coffee to the emergency meeting of Arthur's inner circle, his top lawyer, his crisis management expert, and his CFO. The air is thick with expensive cologne and desperation. How did they get the financials? The lawyer is demanding. It had to be an inside leak, the crisis manager, a sharp woman named Deanna, insists. The satellite photos are one thing, but the wire transfer records. Someone gave them the keys. Arthur Vance slams his fist on the mahogany desk. The delicate porcelain coffee cups on Sarah's tray rattle. "Find them," he snarls, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't care who it is. A board member, an analyst, a goddamn janitor. Find them and destroy them." The family is no longer just arrogant, they are cornered. And Sarah knows with a certainty that chills her to the bone that cornered animals are the most dangerous. They don't care about guilt or innocence. They only care about survival. They will chew off their own leg to escape a trap, and they will sacrifice anyone they perceive to be weaker to create a diversion. Her invisibility, once her shield, now feels like a vulnerability. It's easy to blame a ghost. The crisis meeting in the study stretches into its 10th hour. The room is a mess of discarded documents, half-empty coffee cups, and stale energy. The Vance's dream team is flailing. Their initial strategy, a flat denial, had been blown apart within hours as more evidence from the journal's report surfaced online. Now they are scrambling for a new narrative. Deanna, the crisis manager, is pacing in front of a whiteboard covered in frantic scribbles. "We need to pivot. We can't deny the facts anymore. We have to frame this as a betrayal. We, the Vances, were the victims here. We put our trust in our foreign partners and they defrauded us." "Which partners?" the lawyer asks, rubbing his temples. "We have contracts with dozens of shell NGO. Pointing the finger at one just leads them to another." "We just need one," Deanna says. "One plausible fall guy. A contractor in Sierra Leone, maybe, or Ghana. We say we've initiated legal action, that we are as outraged as the public." A young PR assistant, Chloe, the same one who had looked at Sarah with a flicker of curiosity at the party, is furiously typing on her laptop. "I'm trying to find a viable candidate," she says, her voice strained. "The problem is most of the contractors we used were just paper pushers. No real field presence. It won't hold up to scrutiny." She points at her screen. "There's this one, the Kyla Hun Development Initiative in Sierra Leone. We have a wire transfer receipt from 3 years ago, but the address listed is in a residential district in Freetown, not near the project site at all. It's a dead end." Sarah is in the room to clear away the debris of the long meeting. She moves with her usual quiet efficiency, collecting cups and plates. As she passes behind Chloe, she glances at the screen. She sees the name Kyla Hun and the address in Freetown. She pauses for a fraction of a second. "That's not a dead end," she says. Her voice is soft, almost a whisper, but in the tense silence of the room it sounds like a gavel strike. Every head turns to her. Arthur Vance looks at her as if he's seeing her for the first time, his expression a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "What did you say?" Deanna asks, her eyes narrowing. Sarah feels a flush of heat rise to her cheeks. She has broken the cardinal rule, she has spoken, but the words are already out. She clears her throat and looks at Chloe's screen. "That address in Freetown," she says, her voice a little stronger now. "It's not a residential district. It's next to the Ministry of Works and Public Assets. That's where contractors have to go to register their equipment before they can move it up country to the Kyla Hun district. The office isn't the project site, it's the logistics hub." The room is silent. Chloe stares at her, her mouth slightly agape. The lawyer leans forward, intrigued. "How in the hell would you know that?" Arthur Vance demands. Sarah's gaze is steady. "My mother's family is from Bow," she says simply. "It is 2 hours down the road from Freetown. I have been to that ministry building." Deanna walks over to Chloe's laptop and peers at the screen, using her phone to pull up a satellite map of the address. A few seconds later, her eyes widen. A large, official-looking government building sits right where Sarah said it would be. "She's right," Deanna breathes. "It's a tiny detail in a sea of chaos, a single, solid fact in a swirling storm of lies." But for a moment, it changes the gravity in the room. Sarah is no longer just the maid. She is a source of credible, actionable information. Chloe looks at her not with curiosity anymore, but with a dawning sense of awe. In that moment, Sarah showed them a small, sharp glimpse of a world she understood far better than they did. A world that was not a line item in a budget, but a real place with real rules and real people. The glimpse of competence hangs in the air long after the meeting dissolves in exhaustion. Arthur Vance had grunted something non-committal and retreated to his private office, but the shift was palpable. Sarah was no longer just part of the furniture. She was an anomaly, a question mark. Later that night, the house finally settles into a tense quiet. Sarah is in the main kitchen, methodically cleaning the industrial-grade coffee machine, the repetitive motions a comfort in the lingering chaos. The scent of bleach and lemon is sharp and clean, a stark contrast to the cloying smell of fear that has permeated the mansion. Chloe appears in the doorway, looking small and lost in the cavernous, steel-clad room. Her chic corporate blazer is rumpled, and there are dark circles under her eyes. She is holding a half-written press release as if it were a death sentence. "I don't know what to do," Chloe whispers, her voice cracking. "They want me to write the statement, the one that blames the Kyla Hun initiative. They want me to use the information you gave us to make it sound more authentic." She looks at Sarah, her eyes pleading. "It feels wrong. We're setting up people we've never even met to take the fall for something Mr. Vance did." Sarah finishes wiping down the counter before she turns to face the younger woman. She sees not a PR professional, but a kid in over her head, her moral compass spinning wildly. Sarah has seen that look before, on the faces of young people caught between the orders of powerful men and the quiet voice of their own conscience. She gestures to a small wooden stool in the corner. "Sit," she says gently. Chloe sinks onto the stool, dropping the papers on the floor. "I could lose my job, my whole career." Sarah fills a glass with water from the tap and places it in Chloe's hand. "When I was a girl," Sarah begins, her voice low and even, "there was a great storm that washed out the main bridge connecting our village to the market road. For weeks, no one could get their goods to town. The regional governor came, made a big speech, promised a new, modern bridge. He brought cameras and engineers. Everyone celebrated." She pauses, her eyes distant. But the engineers packed up after a week. The money never came. The governor had his pictures, his good press. We still had a river we could not cross. Chloe looks up, listening intently. The elders in the village didn't complain to the governor, Sarah continues. They didn't write angry letters. They gathered the young men and women. They took the old wood from fallen trees, the strong vines from the forest, and they started building a new bridge themselves. It was not as grand as the one the governor promised. It was simple, and it took a long time. But it was real, and it was ours. She meets Chloe's gaze. You cannot build a roof before you ask the family what they need to stay dry, she says, repeating the simple wisdom she had offered before. And you cannot fix a problem with a lie. A lie is like the governor's bridge. It looks good for a moment, but it will never carry you to the other side. The story settles in the quiet kitchen. It's a simple parable, but it cuts through all of Chloe's corporate training, all the jargon about optics and narrative control. It offers a different kind of clarity, a moral clarity. Chloe looks down at the press release on the floor, then back at Sarah. For the first time in days, the panic in her eyes subsides, replaced by a flicker of resolve. She is still afraid, but she is no longer lost. In that moment, in the quiet of the kitchen, a secret and unlikely alliance is forged. It is not a pact to overthrow the Vances, but something much simpler and more powerful, an agreement to stand on the side of the truth, no matter how small or inconvenient. The brief moment of clarity in the kitchen evaporates with the morning sun. Arthur Vance is done with introspection. He has settled on a path, and it is one of scorched earth. The strategy, refined overnight by Deanna and his legal team, is simple and brutal. They will not just blame the Kyla Hun Development Initiative. They will build an entire narrative around a charismatic, but tragically corrupt, fictional director of that initiative. Deanna lays it all out in the morning meeting, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. His name is Dr. Alusine Fafina, a respected local leader, a man we at the Vance Foundation put our complete faith in. We will paint a picture of him as a beloved figure who was tempted by greed. We will discover evidence that he siphoned our funds into personal accounts. We will express our profound disappointment and heartbreak. We are not just victims of fraud. We are victims of a deep, personal betrayal. It is a masterpiece of misdirection. It gives the media a villain, a face to put on the scandal. It transforms the Vances from perpetrators into grieving, noble benefactors who were simply too trusting. They will announce a new, more rigorous vetting process, the Vance Integrity Initiative, to ensure this never happens again. They will emerge from the ashes not only unscathed, but as champions of philanthropic reform. Sarah learns of the plan not in a meeting, but through its execution. She sees a team of graphic designers working on a memorial page for the Foundation's website, featuring a stock photo of a distinguished-looking black man, captioned Dr. Alusine Fafina. She hears a junior lawyer on the phone trying to fabricate bank statements for a Swiss account. The lie is being constructed all around her, an elaborate stage set for a tragedy in which the villain, the victim, and the hero are all roles being played by the Vances themselves. Chloe is tasked with the most insidious part, writing the personal statements for Arthur and Julian. She is to craft paragraphs of heartfelt sorrow, of their deep personal connection to the entirely fictional Dr. Fafina. Chloe's face is pale, her movements stiff. She avoids Sarah's eyes, a clear sign of the internal war she is fighting. The parable of the bridge is a beautiful story, but the reality of a career, a reputation, and the sheer, crushing power of the Vance machine is a powerful counter-argument. The trap is not just for the public, it's for everyone inside the house. It demands complicity. To remain silent is to agree. To question is to become an enemy. The narrative is a loyalty test. The focal point of this test becomes a series of internal interviews. The family's legal team, on the pretext of gathering all the facts, begins to question every staff member who might have had access to sensitive information. They are looking for the leaker. But more than that, they are reinforcing the official story, making everyone repeat the new lies until they start to sound like truth. They are creating a chorus. Anyone who sings out of tune will be identified as a threat. Sarah watches this all unfold with a growing sense of dread. She understands what is happening. A trap is being laid, a complex piece of machinery designed to crush the truth and anyone who tries to carry it. And she knows, with a sinking feeling in her stomach, that the machine is slowly turning its attention toward her. The knock on her door comes late in the afternoon. It's not the gentle rap of a fellow staff member, but a hard, official summons. Two members of the Vance legal team are waiting for her in the small, sterile staff lounge. The room, usually a place of brief respite, feels like an interrogation cell. The lawyers, a man and a woman in identical navy suits, don't waste time with pleasantries. Their questions are a hail of tiny, sharp stones. "Miss Aloko, how long have you been with the Vance family? Do you have friends who are journalists? Have you ever expressed dissatisfaction with your employment here? You seem to have a rather detailed knowledge of Sierra Leonean bureaucracy. You maintain contacts there." Sarah answers each question calmly and truthfully. "No, no, no. Yes, my family lives there." Then Julian Vance enters the room. He doesn't sit. He looms, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. His presence shifts the atmosphere from a formal inquiry to a personal accusation. "It's funny," Julian says, his voice dripping with faux concern. "You seem to know an awful lot about that ministry building. Almost as if you'd been researching it." "I told you. My family is from the region," Sarah says, her voice steady. "Right," Julian scoffs. "And I'm sure you overheard all sorts of things while you were cleaning. Things you might have misunderstood. Things you might have repeated to the wrong people, maybe out of some misplaced sense of what? Envy." The trap snaps shut. "It was never about finding the leaker. It was about creating one." The female lawyer opens a file. "Sarah, we have reason to believe your connection to the region makes you a compromised party in this investigation. In light of that, and to protect the integrity of our internal review, we are placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately." "Suspended?" Sarah asks, the word tasting like ash. "It's a temporary measure," the male lawyer says, not meeting her eye. "You'll be escorted from the premises. Please have no contact with any other members of the Vance staff." Escorted. The word is designed to humiliate. A security guard, a man she had shared a polite hello with every morning for 3 years, is waiting outside. He looks at the floor, his face filled with shame, as he walks her to the staff exit. He holds a clear plastic bag containing the contents of her locker, a spare uniform, a well-read book of poetry, and a small, hand-carved wooden bird. As she steps out of the ornate iron gates of the Vance estate, she feels a profound sense of isolation. The world outside seems impossibly vast and indifferent. Her key no longer works. Her friends are on the other side of a wall of silence. The system she had served, the house she had kept in pristine order, had turned on her and spit her out with cold, clinical efficiency. What would you do if the system you served decided to erase you? She walks to the bus stop, the plastic bag crinkling in her hand. She thinks of Chloe, and a fresh wave of sadness washes over her. She knows the younger woman will have no choice but to write the lies they asked for. The machine is too big, too powerful. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out the worn photograph. The scuff mark from Julian's shoe is still there, a permanent scar. She looks at the faces of the children, at the humble schoolhouse built of hope and sweat. For a moment, her resolve wavers. The fight seems impossible. The Vances have wealth, power, and a team of experts crafting their lies into a global truth. She has nothing but a quiet, damaged photograph. In the fading light of the afternoon, it feels like an all-is-lost moment. But as she stares at the image, a different feeling begins to smolder beneath the despair. It is not hope. It is a quiet, burning vow. They had tried to erase her. They had not yet succeeded. For 3 days, Sarah exists in a state of suspended animation. Her small, tidy apartment feels like a holding cell. The silence is a stark contrast to the constant, low-level hum of the Vance mansion. She follows the news, watching with a detached sense of horror as the Vance's narrative takes hold. The fictional Dr. Fafina is everywhere, his stock photo face looking mournfully from news websites and television screens. Arthur Vance gives a somber, emotional interview, speaking of his deep personal pain at the betrayal. The public, for the most part, seems to be buying it. The story is clean, compelling, and absolves everyone of the messy reality of systemic corruption. On the evening of the 3rd day, a plain white envelope appears under her door. There is no return address. Inside is a single sheet of paper with a time, a date, and the name of a television studio. Double Unit Primetime Live. Tomorrow night, Arthur Vance's final, definitive interview to put this painful chapter to rest. Underneath the details in small, neat handwriting are two words: the bridge. Chloe. Sarah holds the note in her hand, her heart pounding. It is a lifeline, a sliver of light in the darkness. It is an act of quiet rebellion, a choice. Chloe has risked everything to give her this. Now, Sarah has to make a choice of her own. She can let the lie stand, retreat into the safety of her silence, and try to piece her life back together. Or she can walk into the lion's den. She looks around her apartment. On her small bookshelf is her prized possession, a collection of legal texts on international development law, relics from a life she had been forced to leave behind years ago. She had been a paralegal, on track to becoming a lawyer, working for a human rights NGO before political upheaval in her home country, and a family crisis had forced her to flee and take whatever work she could find in America. The Vances had never thought to ask about her life before she put on their uniform. She pulls out a book and opens it. The dense, technical language feels like a homecoming. For the next several hours, she doesn't think like a maid. She thinks like a legal analyst. She doesn't have the Vances' financial records, but she has something more powerful: first-hand knowledge of their character, their methods, and the one piece of tangible truth they cannot erase: her photograph. A plan begins to form. It is not a complex plan. It does not rely on legal maneuvering or hidden evidence. It relies on the simple, explosive power of a true story told at the right time. She will not go there to accuse or to shout. She will go there to bear witness. She lays out her clothes. Not her uniform, but a simple, dark blue dress she bought years ago for a wedding. It is modest, dignified, and utterly invisible. It is the dress of a woman who is not there to be seen, but to be heard. She takes the photograph from her wallet and looks at it for a long time. She smooths the bent corner as best she can. The scuff mark remains, a flaw that now seems essential to its story. It is a photograph of a dream, but it is also a photograph of a reality that has been stepped on, abused, and disrespected. It is a perfect metaphor. She places the photo carefully into the pocket of the dress. She thinks of the walk to the studio, the security guards, the producers who will try to stop her. She knows her chances of getting inside, let alone on camera, are slim to none. But as she turns off the light and sits in the quiet darkness, she knows she has to try. Chloe built her a bridge. It is time to see if it will hold her weight. The double-unit studio is a fortress of controlled reality. Outside, a handful of reporters wait, hoping for a stray comment. Inside, the air is cold and smells of electronics and hairspray. Sarah, armed with the press pass Chloe had cleverly tucked into the envelope, feels a tremor of fear as she walks through the glass doors. The pass identifies her as a freelance production assistant, a designation so bland and common that the board security guard barely glances at it. She finds Chloe near a chaotic craft services table. The younger woman is pale, her hands shaking as she clutches a clipboard. "He's in makeup," Chloe whispers, not looking at Sarah. "You have maybe 15 minutes. There's a small observation room behind the main studio. It's for network junior staff. No one will notice you there. It's the best I could do." She presses a key card into Sarah's hand. "Good luck." The observation room is small and dark, dominated by a large one-way mirror looking directly onto the brightly lit set. Sarah can see Arthur Vance sitting across from the network's most famous journalist, a woman named Sharon Vale, known for her piercing, relentless questions. He looks composed, somber, every inch the wounded benefactor. The interview begins. Arthur is magnificent. He is a maestro of feigned emotion, his voice catching at all the right moments as he recounts his friendship with the fictional Dr. Fafana. He speaks of trust, betrayal, and his renewed commitment to transparency and accountability. Sharon Vale listens patiently, her expression neutral. Then she leans forward. "Mr. Vance," she says, her tone shifting from empathetic to analytical. The report from the Global Ledger was incredibly specific. It wasn't just about one man. It detailed a pattern of financial misdirection spanning half a decade. How could one rogue director orchestrate something on that scale without anyone at the Vance Foundation noticing? Arthur's practiced composure tightens ever so slightly. "As I've said, our trust was absolute. His reporting was impeccable. We were fooled just as so many others were. And yet," Vale presses, We have spoken to 3 other NGO who worked in that same district. None of them have ever heard of a Dr. Alusine Fafina or the Kyla Hun Development Initiative. Not a single one. A flicker of panic in Arthur's eyes. He begins to bluster, talking about the complexities of international aid. In the observation room, Sarah feels her heart begin to pound. This is the moment. The lie is cracking. She slips out of the dark room and walks with quiet purpose toward the studio floor. A stressed-looking producer holds up a hand to stop her. "Whoa, where do you think you're going? We're live." Sarah looks him in the eye. "Mr. Vance is a liar," she says, her voice low but firm, "and I have the proof." The producer is about to call security, but something in her calm, unwavering gaze stops him. On the set, Arthur is visibly floundering. The interview is derailing, becoming a disaster. The producer makes a split-second decision, the kind that defines careers. He nods toward the set. "You have 30 seconds. Sarah walks into the blinding lights. Arthur Vance sees her, and for the first time, his mask of control shatters completely. His face contorts in a mixture of shock and fury. Sharon Vale turns, her eyes widening in surprise. "I apologize for the interruption," Sarah says, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She turns not to Arthur, but to the camera. "My name is Sarah Aloko. For the past 3 years, I have worked as a maid in the Vance household." A collective gasp ripples through the studio crew. "Mr. Vance speaks of betrayal," she continues. "I am from Sierra Leone. I know the Kyla Hun district. There is no Dr. Fafena. There is no development initiative. These are lies Mr. Vance created to hide the truth." "This is absurd," Arthur sputters, finding his voice. "She's a disgruntled employee, security." But Sharon Vale holds up a hand. "Let her speak." Sarah reaches into her pocket and pulls out the worn, creased photograph. She holds it up to the camera. "This isn't a press kit," she says, her voice clear and ringing with an authority that transcends her uniform. "This is the community school in my village. I helped build it 15 years ago, with my own hands, with my own family. It was built with less than $5,000 and the will of the people. It has no marble floors or fancy nameplate, but it is real. It has educated hundreds of children. This is what real philanthropy looks like." The camera zooms in on the photograph. On the smiling children, the humble building, the scuff mark from Julian's shoe. The image is projected onto millions of screens across the country, a quiet, undeniable truth held up against the backdrop of a billionaire's crumbling lies. The studio is utterly silent. The power has shifted. It is no longer in the hands of the man in the expensive suit, but with the woman in the simple blue dress. Literal goosebumps when she held up that photo. She has not just interrupted an interview, she has hijacked the entire narrative. Arthur Vance sits frozen, his face ashen, exposed and powerless in the glare of the lights he had sought out himself. The interview ends in chaos. The feed is cut, but the damage is done. The image of Sarah holding the photograph is instantly iconic. The maid's photo trends worldwide. News outlets, smelling blood, abandon the Vance's narrative and pivot entirely to Sarah's story. By morning, the Vance Foundation is not just a scandal, it's a punchline, a meme, a global symbol of corporate hypocrisy. The fallout is swift and brutal. The museum board announces an indefinite hold on the Vance philanthropy wing. Major corporate sponsors of the Vance Foundation issue statements severing all ties. The Attorney General's office announces a formal investigation into the foundation's financial practices. The Vance empire, which had seemed so indestructible, is teetering on the brink of collapse. A week later, Sarah receives a call from Arthur Vance's lawyer. The voice on the other end is no longer sharp and accusatory, but soft and pleading. Mr. Vance is requesting a meeting. In private. They meet not in the grand mansion, but in a neutral, soulless conference room in a downtown law office. Arthur Vance looks like a different man. He is diminished, his usual aura of power replaced by a weary, hollowed-out desperation. The granite has crumbled, revealing the frightened man within. Julian is there too, standing by the window, his back to the room, a portrait of shame. "Miss Aloko," Arthur begins, his voice raspy, we have made a terrible mistake." He doesn't offer an apology, not a real one. He offers a deal. "I am prepared to offer you a settlement," he says, pushing a document across the polished table. "A significant one. Enough to ensure you and your family are comfortable for the rest of your lives. In return, we would require a simple non-disclosure agreement. It is the classic tool of the powerful hush money, a check to buy her silence to make the problem go away. Sarah looks at the number on the page. It is more money than she has ever dreamed of. It could build a dozen schools. It could change her life forever. She thinks of the governor's grand, empty promises. She thinks of the bridge built of sweat and vines. She slides the document back across the table. "My silence is not for sale, Mr. Vance," she says, her voice quiet but unyielding. Arthur looks stunned. "What do you want then? You want to destroy me, my family." Sarah looks at him, and for the first time she feels a sliver of something like pity. He is a man so accustomed to transactions that he cannot comprehend an action based on principle. "I don't want your money," she says. "And I don't want revenge. Revenge is a fire that burns the forest to the ground to get at one rotten tree. I want to plant something new." She leans forward. "You want to save your family's name. Then make it mean something again. I don't want a settlement. I want restitution. Dissolve the current foundation, fire the board, and start over. Create a new foundation governed by a new charter. A charter based on truth, transparency, and community-led development. The kind that builds real things, not just press releases." Julian finally turns from the window. He looks at Sarah, his eyes red-rimmed. He has seen the photograph replayed on every news channel, a constant reminder of his own callousness. "How?" he asks, his voice barely a whisper. "How would we even do that?" Sarah meets his gaze. "You start," she says, "by listening to the people you claim to be helping. You start with the village in this photograph. You go there, you learn, and you help them build what they need next. Not what you think they need." It is a choice of soft justice. She is not demanding punishment. She is demanding reform. She is not asking for his ruin. She is offering him a difficult, narrow path to redemption. The choice, she makes clear, is his. The blank check lies on the table between them, a symbol of the old way. Her proposal hangs in the air, a blueprint for a new one. The decision does not come easily. For weeks, the Vance family and their advisors debate Sarah's proposal. The lawyers argue for the settlement, for damage control, for the familiar path of containing a crisis. But the public pressure is relentless. Sarah's story has captured the world's imagination, and her refusal of the hush money has elevated her from a whistleblower to a moral authority. The Vances are trapped. The only way out is forward, on the path she has laid for them. The announcement, when it comes, is seismic. In a joint press conference with the Attorney General's office, Arthur Vance announces the complete dissolution of the Vance Foundation. All existing assets will be liquidated under state supervision, with funds being redirected to a portfolio of vetted, legitimate NGO. But the real news is the second part of the announcement. The Vances will be launching a new, smaller, and radically different philanthropic entity, the Ground Truth Initiative. The change is not vague or cosmetic. It is specific, structural, and systemic. Sarah, working with a team of pro bono lawyers Chloe helped her find, had insisted on ironclad specifics. The new charter includes the Ground Truth Clause, a legally binding requirement that at least 2 board members, including one non-Vance family member, must physically visit and live within a project community for a minimum of 1 week before any funds are released. A community-led board, the board of directors, is restructured. 1/3 of the seats are now permanently reserved for community leaders and development experts from the regions the initiative serves. They are not advisors. They have full voting power. Radical financial transparency. The initiative's finances are to be published in real time on a public website, tracking every dollar from donation to expenditure. No shell corporations, no opaque subcontractors. The Sarah Aloko verification protocol, named in her honor, this is a new, rigorous, multi-stage vetting process for all potential projects. It prioritizes listening tours, needs assessments conducted by local leaders, and sustainability plans that do not create dependency. The protocol is to be made open source, available for any other foundation to adopt. The most shocking announcement is the leadership of the new initiative. Julian Vance will serve as the co-chair. The other co-chair, and the head of the powerful new verification board, is Sarah Aloko. The resistance to this new model doesn't vanish, but the path is now open. Old guard philanthropists scoff at the inefficiency of the Ground Truth Clause. Some business partners see the radical transparency as naive. But for a new generation of activists, donors, and the general public, it is a revolutionary step forward. It is a system rebuilt not around the ego of the donor, but around the dignity of the recipient. The rulebook has not just been amended, it has been completely rewritten. 6 months later, Sarah is a world away from the sterile boardrooms and flashing cameras. She is back in her home village in Sierra Leone. The air is warm and smells of red earth and wood smoke. The frantic, anxious energy of the Vance mansion is a distant memory, replaced by the gentle, familiar rhythm of community life. She is not here as the co-chair of a foundation. She has no title here. She is just Sarah, daughter of Aminata, niece of Kadiatu. She is here to heal. She spends her days not in meetings but in conversation. She sits with the elders under the shade of a large mango tree, listening to their stories. She helps the women prepare the evening meal, her hands moving with the familiar muscle memory of shelling beans and pounding cassava. She walks to the river with the children, their laughter a balm on the wounds she hadn't realized she was carrying. One afternoon, she sits in a classroom in the school from the photograph. The teacher, a young man named David whom she remembers as a boy, is leading the children in a lesson on local history. The classroom is simple, the walls adorned with the children's own colorful drawings. The sunlight streams through the open windows. Sarah doesn't say a word. She just sits at the back, observing. She listens to the sound of chalk on the blackboard, the eager voices of the children answering questions. This is the result. This is the return on investment that could never be captured on a Vance Foundation financial report. It is the sound of a community's future being written, one lesson at a time. Later, she walks through the village with her aunt Kadiatu. "You are quiet," her aunt observes, her eyes kind. "I am remembering how to be," Sarah replies. "For a long time I was a ghost. I had to be silent to survive. I am learning the sound of my own voice again." Her aunt stops and places a hand on her arm. "Your voice was never gone, my child. It was just waiting for the right room to speak in. Some rooms are too small to hold a big truth." In that moment, under the vast African sky, a profound sense of peace settles over Sarah. Her dignity, which she had guarded so fiercely, feels not like a shield anymore, but like the very air she breathes. It was never something the Vances could give or take away. It was always hers. The public vindication was justice, but this quiet homecoming, this was healing. She was reclaiming not just her story, but herself, far from the applause and the outrage, in the only place she had ever truly called home. A week into her stay, a Land Rover, caked in red dust, rumbles into the village. Julian Vance gets out. He is alone. There are no assistants, no cameras, no press. He looks thinner, and the arrogance in his posture has been replaced by a quiet uncertainty. He is dressed not in a designer suit, but in simple, practical khakis and a plain cotton shirt. The villagers watch him with cautious curiosity. They know who he is. The story has reached them, a garbled but essentially true legend of the local girl who brought a giant to his knees. Julian doesn't make a speech. He doesn't gather the elders for a performative apology. He finds the village chief, and with a humility that shocks everyone, asks for permission to stay for a few days. He asks if there is any work that needs doing. The chief, a wise old man with eyes that have seen everything, points to the western wall of the schoolhouse. The recent rains have weakened the mortar in one section, and it needs to be repaired before the next wet season. For the next 4 days, Julian works. He is clumsy at first, his soft hands unaccustomed to the rough texture of brick and the weight of a shovel. He works alongside the local men, mixing mortar, hauling bricks, learning the rhythm of the labor. He doesn't complain. He listens. He sweats under the same sun. He eats the same food, sitting on the ground with the others. Sarah watches him from a distance. She sees the blisters forming on his hands. She sees the exhaustion in his face at the end of each day. But she also sees something else, a slow, painstaking chipping away of his own entitlement. He is not performing. He is participating. On his last evening, he finds Sarah by the community well. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the village. "I used to think my father built things," Julian says, his voice quiet. He looks at his own blistered hands, but he just signed checks. "This," he gestures to the newly repaired wall, "this is building." He finally looks at her and his eyes are clear of the old mockery. My father sent me here. He said I had to learn what he forgot. He was wrong. He never knew it in the first place. He pauses. Thank you for showing me. It is not an apology for what he did, for the insult, for the shoe on the photograph. It is something deeper. It is an acknowledgement of her competence, her wisdom, her entire world which he had once dismissed as a Maid village. It is a recognition earned not with grandstanding, but with the quiet dignity of shared work. And for Sarah, it is a far more meaningful apology than any words could ever be. It opens a door not just for him, but for a different kind of future between their two worlds. Months pass. Sarah is back in the United States, dividing her time between her apartment and the gleaming new offices of the Ground Truth Initiative. The work is challenging but fulfilling. She travels, she listens, she helps communities draft proposals that are routed through the new, rigorous protocol that bears her name. One morning, Julian asks her to join him in the lobby of their new building. There's something I want you to see, he says. The lobby is minimalist and modern, designed to feel open and welcoming. But the far wall, the one that greets every visitor, is the focus of the entire space. On it hangs a massive, beautifully framed photograph. It's her photograph. The image has been enlarged to fill a space 10 feet wide. The grain of the old film is visible, giving it a raw, authentic texture. The smiling faces of the children are now life-sized, their joy radiating into the room. The humble schoolhouse stands as a proud, defiant testament to what is real. Even the imperfections are there, the slightly bent corner, the faded colors, and the faint, ghostly scuff mark across the center, a detail they had deliberately chosen not to digitally erase. It is part of the story. Beside the large print, mounted in a museum-quality, climate-controlled case, is the original photograph itself. Small, creased, and fragile, it rests on a bed of archival velvet. It looks like a sacred relic. Its transformation is complete. It began as a private memory, a source of hidden strength in her pocket. It was then desecrated, becoming a symbol of disrespect and humiliation on a marble floor. On live television, it became a weapon of truth, a piece of evidence that dismantled an empire of lies. And now, here on this wall, it has become a public charter, the founding document of a new promise. It has evolved from stigma to strength. We needed a mission statement, Julian says, standing beside her. I realized we already had one. Sarah stares at the wall, at the two versions of her photo, the small, battered original and its magnificent, powerful echo. She thinks of the journey, of the cost, of the quiet vow she made at the bus stop on the day she was fired. Sometimes justice arrives not with a verdict, but with a frame. She reaches out and gently touches the cool glass of the display case, her fingers resting just above the image of the little girl in the yellow dress. Her niece. A quiet readiness for the future settles over her. The past is not erased. It is enshrined, honored, and used as a compass to guide the way forward. A year later, the lobby of the Ground Truth Initiative is filled with the quiet murmur of a visiting group of high school students. They are part of a social studies class on ethics and global citizenship. Their teacher has brought them here to see a new model of philanthropy in action. A tour guide, a young, bright-eyed woman, leads them to the main wall. The students fall silent, gazing up at the enormous photograph. This was our beginning, the guide says, her voice resonating with genuine pride. This picture was carried for years in the pocket of a woman named Sarah Iloko. She worked as a maid, and for a long time, no one saw her. They only saw her uniform. She gestures to the small, original photo in the display case. That photograph holds the story of a real school, built with love and community. When the world was being told a powerful, expensive lie, she held up this simple, powerful truth. The guide pauses, letting the students absorb the image. Our entire foundation is built on the lesson of this photograph. It reminds us that the most powerful truths are often carried by the people we forget to see. It reminds us to look past the uniform, to listen to the quiet voices, and to always check the ground truth for ourselves. One of the students, a teenage girl with a notebook, raises her hand. So what happened to her? To Sarah, the guide smiles. She's not here today, she says. She's in Bolivia, visiting a community that's building a new clean water system. She'll be back next month to present their proposal to our board. The final shot of the story is not of Sarah, it is not of Julian, it is of the students turning back to look at the photograph on the wall. The camera slowly pushes in, moving past the faces of the students, past the grand frame, until it fills the entire screen with the image from Sarah's pocket. It lingers on the faces of the children in the photograph, smiling, hopeful, their legacy now secure, a permanent testament to a quiet integrity that changed everything. Whose quiet excellence, hidden in plain sight, has shaped the world you live in.